Good afternoon, everyone. This is Bill Jarrard, Chief Operating Officer for the ILP. And today I'm really excited because this is a session I've been waiting for quite some time now. As many of you know, I've been working with Kerry for quite a while now, I guess, but in this last 6 months in particular, it's been looking at how we can raise the standards for L&D professionals globally, but certainly in a contrast to, say, the current Cert 4 and things like that. And I was involved in a lot of the early roundtables that did some research on what it was that organizations were looking for, what professionals were expecting to have, and things like that. And as a result of that, the L&D capability framework came out. And what we're going to be doing today is Kerry's going to be taking us through that, talking a little bit about the background for it, why it happened, and share us a little bit about the actual framework itself. And during that session, we're going to do a quick poll at the beginning, and I'm going to be asking you to also annotate on the screen, and I'll guide you through that when Kerry's been sharing some screens with us. So this is an exciting session. For me, it's one of those things that says, as L&D professionals, we need to understand, particularly now, how we can go forward with being professionals. I was listening to Josh Burswin just this morning, talking a little bit about what the expectations are, and I think we're right in line with where things are going. So I'm really looking forward to that. We've also got Dr. Peter Beven from QUT Executive College with us today, and he's been helping us set up the capability framework assessment process. And so Peter's going to also come in and talk with us about how we can move forward with that and share a little bit of the process that's part of the assessment. While we're going through the sessions, please go ahead and fire up your chat box. And if you have any questions that we want to address later, or as we go through, I'll be monitoring those and trying to put those into to the team as we move forward. So just put those in as we go forward and work along with us. So I have one other person, Kerry, called Barry. Do we know what Barry? Bernice, maybe?
Bernice, yep.
Okay, good. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Kerry now and let her take us through the background, and we can go from there. Over to you, Kerry.
Thanks, Bill. I'm just going to share my screen with everybody. All right, so everybody can see that? Yeah. Bit nod. All right. So thank you for joining us this afternoon and helping us go through and explore the new standards for learning and development professionals. What I thought I would do is just go through, give you an overview and share with you the why. So what was the need? Why did this all come about? The how, so the research that we undertook to come up with the standards. We then put it all together into a framework, so I'll share that with you. And then the what now, which is the really exciting piece. So as we've gone through all of this, the what now is what we've been working with Dr. Peter Beven, and it's really exciting because he's very innovative and we're constantly coming up with new ideas on how to support L&D professionals. So I'm also really looking forward to him sharing that with you as well. So let's start with the why. Which is basically with the way things have been changing in the world and the impacts it's having on with organisations, not just over the last 10 years, but particularly in the last few months with everything that's been happening. We're moving away from the old traditional methodologies and moving into being more innovative with how we design and deliver our learning initiatives. So it's not about just creating programs, it's about creating your learning pathways just to ensure that we actually achieve the desired learning outcomes. And one of the other needs was basically every 2 weeks, I get someone that rings me up or in a chat talks about the certificate for in training and assessment. So, and usually they're not so positive, but this qualification has become the industry qualification by default. So it's not suited for today's learning and development professionals. And don't get me wrong, it has its place. And I think in the VET sector for trainers and assessors that deliver accredited training, it's perfect. But for those that work for corporates or trainers that deliver non-accredited training, there's a huge gap. So what I thought I would do is kick off with a poll and just find out with the people that are joining us this afternoon, those that have done the certificate for in training and assessment, how useful was it in helping you become a capable learning and development professionals? Bill, can you help organise that poll?
The poll is now active.
All right, so if you can just go in there and just choose which of those responses.
So we're looking at watching the progress going through.
Mm-hmm.
6. Couple more coming through, I think. Everybody have? If you've done a Cert 4, if you haven't, then let's find out. And how valuable do you find it? 18 out of 18. I'm going to end the poll now, Kerry.
All right, thanks, Bill. And that's good. I'm glad someone's somewhat useful. And also, once again, depending on the learning initiative, it depends on who is delivering it to the outcomes. But we're finding that a lot of people, even though they've got, you know, masters in education or bachelors in or diplomas in learning and development, quite often it's a requirement that you have to have the Cert 4 and TAE. So I guess that's where the frustration is coming from. So thank you for sharing your thoughts about that.
Just so, you can clear your own poll if you need to, the screen.
All right. Can you stop sharing the results if you can, Bill? That'd be good.
Each person has to just close it themselves.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
Just click the top corner right.
All right, sorry, it's just a bit on mine. So how do we go about researching and finding out what the new standards or capabilities were? So we ran a series of workshops across around Australia, in Perth, Melbourne, Brisbane and Sydney. We ran, and we called these sessions the Setting the Standards workshops, and we ran them for both internal and external learning and development professionals. We also surveyed our 4,500 database of learning and development professionals to see what they said. And we got them all to do a bit of crystal balling. So having a look at what I've got up on the slide there, for them to explore their own perceptions of what the future looked like, and then therefore what were the desirable and essential capabilities, skills, knowledge, and mindsets for L&D professionals, not just for now, but also into the future. So we got them to sort of share that information with us. And then we also, once we had that data, we went and interviewed some heads of learning and development, and just to see what their perceptions were we on track, were there any gaps, or were we on the right track, which they reinforced definitely on the right track. So there was lots of discussions, hundreds and hundreds of sticky notes. So trying to get these sticky notes back in order on our sheets from the various states was interesting, but we collated them all. And we actually created themes, which then became our 6 dimensions. And those 6 dimensions, as you can see, were professional attributes. So what the personal skills that the L&D professionals need, strategy and planning, designing and developing, executing and delivering, evaluate and feedback, and business smart. So what I'd like, and from those, underneath those, there's 220 behaviours, and we've rated them from novice through to expert of what L&D professionals will need throughout their career. Good news for you today, I'm not going to share the 220 behaviours with you. I'm just going to do a helicopter view for you, but there's more details available on the ILP website and the platform that Peter's going to share with you. So I thought I'd get straight into it. So the first dimension, as I said, was professional attributes. And the number one on the left-hand side is value diversity. So that's pretty straightforward. It's appreciating diverse methods and techniques that you can use yourself in your programs. It's respecting and valuing your learners, their different preferences, personalities, experiences, and beliefs, and incorporating that into your learning experience for them. The next thing is the continual development. And this is surprising to me. A lot of L&D professionals, once they get their Cert 4, that's where their L&D journey, of their development journey, stops. So as I said, things are changing, and we just need to keep up to date with not only the development techniques and methodologies, but also the area of expertise. So if you're specialising in leadership, you need to keep up to date with the latest research. Quite often people get their qualification and they think they're a general practitioner, that they can deliver any topic needed because they're a good trainer, but you really do need to have an in-depth knowledge in the area that you're delivering in. And the last one for this dimension is emotional intelligence. So it's communicating effectively with empathy, and then also being aware of not only your own emotions and your energy levels, but those of your learners. So it's sort of being more aware of what is happening in your learning environment. And it's, you know, not just during the session, but also before and after with the learners. Now, the next one is strategy and planning. And so whether you're designing or facilitating or engaging your stakeholders, there needs to be detailed planning involved. So you need to, you know, work out what your priorities are, resources, activities, and make sure that they're done in a purposeful and meaningful way. So the first one in this one is stakeholder engagement. And when I talk about stakeholders, I'm not talking about your senior managers. I'm talking anybody who can influence the learning. So it could be your learners, it could be their managers, obviously you're the trainer or the facilitator, and it could even be peers. And I just wanted to do a quick question with you, and Bill's going to help you be able to respond. But quite often the learning, people just assume it's the responsibility of the trainer or the facilitator, but I just want you to have a look at who in this graph. So it could be the learner, the manager, or the facilitator, and when. So the before, during, and after. So have a look at that, and which grid do you think, or who and when would have the biggest impact on the learning outcome? So Bill, can you share with people how they can...
All right, guys, I thought a fun way to maybe do this is if we all turned on your annotations. And so to do that, just go up to the top middle of your screen where it says you are viewing Kerry Brock's screen view options. And if you click on the box down there, you'll come up with annotate. And that brings you up a bar of selected items. What I suggest you do is just go to the stamp button and click on any one of those stamps. And you've now got a stamp that if you click on it, on the box where Kerry's got the things like I'm doing here, you can see that I've got something there. So again, you can use different ones, and you can put around, try not to put them on top of each other so that we can actually get a feel for things. Kerry, do we know a Shay Deze?
No.
Okay.
I know.
Shaidesai.
Yeah, Shy Desai. He's a learning plan.
All right.
Shy Desai learning plan.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Oh yeah, there he is. Okay. Well, that's interesting.
It's interesting. We have a lot more ticks and...
Well, that depends on what box, what stamp they click.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, that's really interesting because the actual research says that the who and when that has the biggest impact is actually the manager before the actual training event. So it's the manager sitting down and talking to the learner about why they're going onto the learning program, how it's going to help them, and how they'll be able to apply it afterwards. And I noticed probably a lot of people put it after. The after is the second biggest impact on the learner. So obviously providing those opportunities to apply the learning, support the learner when they get back into the workplace. So, you know, as I said, you know, how many times do you get learners that come along to your training programs and sit there and go, I've got no idea why I'm here. So it really does have a big impact. Thanks, Bill.
All right.
So the next one is project planning. And it's interesting, when I did start sharing the capability framework with some of our members, they've gone, project planning, what on earth has that got to do with learning and development? And as I said before, you know, we're moving from running just straight training programs, but into sort of training, what do you call it, campaigns. So just want to have a think about, why do you think project management is important for learning and development professionals? And if you could just respond your thoughts in the chat box, that would be great. We'll get to share some of those. I saw what you're doing that, Martin. I agree. ASQA have sort of said it is I guess the TA is like a foundation for new trainers and assessors that are in the vet sector as well. Logistics, yep, thanks Raj. Quality and timing is really important. If they don't plan, you plan to fail. Great old quote. Yep. Creates clarity from A to Z. Yep. Timelines, outcomes, logistics. Yep, all of those sorts of things. So, I mean, it's as we said before, it's preparing yourself and your learners ready for the learning event. It's all your communications, it's your marketing, it's your stakeholder engagement, learning transfer activities. Is there any preparation or primary activities you do prior to the learning event? Yeah, Martin, ensuring that everybody has clear expectations of when and how things are going to be happening. Should cover whole life cycle through evaluation, absolutely. So right through from your initial conversation with your stakeholders, identifying your learning needs, right through to your final evaluation. So and you'll be doing sort of evaluations immediately after, and then down the track to monitor the application. That's excellent. So thank you. Absolutely. So project management, as you can see, is now a really good or vital capability for L&D professionals. The third capability under strategy and planning is learning transfer strategies. So if you need to achieve the desired outcomes and meet your stakeholders' expectations, you need to determine how the learners need to be supported. So before and after, what activities, how are they going to be applied, or sorry, how are they going to apply the learning and keep the learning journey happening so the learning continues? And who needs to be involved supporting the learner in that process as well. So they're really important to consider the learning strategies as well. And learning strategies should be even way back when you start designing, not sort of start thinking about it after you've run the program. The third element, also dimension, is design and develop. So we're now getting into the standard technical skills, but it's designing learning solutions. And now with all the technology and the way that the roles have evolved, there's so many different design techniques and tools and methodologies that you can use. So it's getting familiar with all of those so that when you need to provide a solution, you're doing the right solution. You're not trying to fit your stakeholder or the organization or your learners into the same mold, whether you run a one-day program or a two-day program, you're designing it based on the learner's needs and the organizational needs. And funny enough, we recently did a quick poll with our members on what was the what were the mistakes that L&D professionals make. And number one was the cookie cutter approach with trying to fit everybody or using the same program through every sort of learning experience. The next one is developing learning pathways. So it's really important that we think the whole picture, the whole journey. So no longer, as I said, is your L&D program a standalone event. It's a process that you need to consider all of those components as long and your before and after activities. And designing your learning materials. This is really important. So in my old days at AIM, I don't say old, it's 20 plus years ago now, people used to walk away with their big thick manual full of all the information or information overload when they went back to their workplace. And the workbook should be easy reference materials or job aids. So when they go back to it, it's easy to have a look at. And we did some research while I was at AIM to find out how many learners actually looked at their folders once they went back to the workplace. And interestingly enough, 95% of them never looked at their folders again, which I thought, okay, they spend so much money in printing and they're not being used. So, and I thought this cartoon might be a bit relevant for sharing now.
If you look behind me, you can see all the folders I have.
The books or folders, I don't hold mine. I mean, and they're hard to let go. I have mine. I have a whole heap on my bookshelf, and to part with my can't. But I very, very rarely will have a look at them. So, and as I said, if you want people to do it, they should be, like job aids or your quick infographics and things like that, so people can pick them up just to refresh their memory. Yeah, they're not going to use the folder again. So you could save yourself a lot of printing if you are still doing the big manuals as well. And the same as during the work thing, when you're running your programs, they should basically just be your activities, some quotes and things to make it interesting, not just detailed notes as well. And that may vary depending on what you're doing, but that's sort of the common thoughts of what the sessions that we came out with. So that's the end of our third dimension. So Bill, I just sort of check with you. Have you noticed any questions or comments that we should respond to in the chat section?
Nothing that I can specifically look at, although Peter's asked the question about if we could do a poll on the audience for consultants versus L&D, corporate L&D folks. I don't know how to do a poll right in the middle of this thing, but perhaps what we could do is just do a, you know, on your everybody has the reactions at the very bottom there, where you have the thumbs up or the clap. Maybe if people could do a clap if they're a consultant and a thumbs up if they're an L&D person, and then we could just scan across. So clap if you're a consultant, and thumbs up if you're a corporate person. And then for those, if you're looking across the top in gallery view, you can just scan across and you can see what you're getting. So we got some thumbs up there, some thumbs up, a few thumbs up, yep. If you happen to have gone away very quickly because they drop away after a few seconds, just do it again for us. So it looks to me, Peter, like we've got about, I don't know, it's pretty close to 40, 60, 40% corporate by the looks of that. So hopefully that helped a little bit.
All right, thanks for that. I was just having a look at some of the chats as well. So I've got two screens. So I'm looking to the right is where the chats are appearing. Bernie was saying that they always ask for the PowerPoint, and there's nothing wrong with, you know, a printout of your slides and they can take notes. They're good refreshers as well, because they're sort of should be bullet, you know, dot points. But we recently had a session by Gihan, sorry, what's his last name again?
Ferreira.
On how to make interesting presentations, and virtually bullet points are out. They're big no-notes, should be the images and you know, smart art and things like that. So but I take, you know, consideration that we train across so many different areas and things like that, so in some cases you will need to have bullet points. So but that's relevant. It's just not the overload with using them as well. So
Malcolm asked the question, do we need to distinguish face-to-face from online public courses? So I'm assuming whether it's a face-to-face or public. My guess would be that you'd need to certainly acknowledge that they're different.
Yep. Sorry, what was the question again, Bill?
Do we also need to distinguish face-to-face from online public courses?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a different experience with how you facilitate with them as well. So, and the good thing is, like, you know, when you're in the classroom, they don't actually see your facial expressions, but they'll also get the energy from the other learners around you. So, you know, it's once again understanding the different delivery methods that you can do, both online, virtually, and face-to-face. There's a lot of people out there that say that you can do whatever you can do face-to-face, you can do virtually. You can sort of moderation, but if I was delivering both, I'd be sort of having a look at all the different design methodologies. And once again, you don't go crazy by running multiple activities. You just try and keep it engaging and keeping them involved. But there is yeah, a slight difference as well. All right. Thanks, Bill. The fourth dimension is executing and delivering. So this is executing your learning pathway and your project elements, as well as delivering your learning initiatives. So the first one is your delivery and learner prep. So learners need to know the logistics, where they're going, the time, all of those sorts of things, how the learning is going to be delivered so they can sort of prepare themselves mentally, how it's going to help them, and then if they have to prepare themselves or if there's any preparation activities. So getting them as comfortable and communications with them prior to the learning is really important. And then also to prepare yourself. So you need to prepare your materials, your mindset, your plans, your backup activities, and your resources, you know, those sorts of things as well. Obviously, managing your learner environment. So you want to manage the environment as well as monitoring the energy levels of your learners and their engagement, and managing and preventing disruptive behaviours, because you really want to make sure that you're facilitating engaging learning, that you're using the various techniques, you're monitoring the learning progress and being flexible to meet those needs. You're not following a session plan and someone asks a question, oh, we'll get to that later. So it's sort of being flexible and working with the energy levels with that group in front of you as well. Now, the fifth element is our evaluate and feedback. And this is the one where I sadly think we fall a bit back on. You know, it's really important that we measure the success, and I still hear people having the same issues of what they had 30 years ago when I started in learning and development, whereas they don't know, or they're not getting the results, or they don't understand the results that they're getting from their budget or their learning budget or their training budget. So you know, you have to measure the success of your learning, whether it's and measure both your long-term and your short-term success. Please don't tell me that you just use your happy sheets, because that's not going to give you honest, meaningful feedback. So quite often people are just going to tick so they can get out of the training room and get on their merry way, and they don't want to upset the trainer. And it's interesting, when I was at AIM managing facilitators there, they'd bring up their happy sheets and they'd go, 777, look at me, I'm great. Oh, 1, what's wrong with that person? So it's sort of like, and, you know, of course it was about the venue, the meals, you know, and you really want to know what worked well, what didn't work well in that training program, how can I improve it? So the number one capability in this dimension is measure the program effectiveness. So this is the design and the delivery of the program. So what evaluation data do you need to collect? Have you spoken to the stakeholders? What are their success measures? What are they expecting to see? How are you going to measure and collect that data? And how are you going to report? What were the conclusions? What are you going to do differently as a result of the feedback and the recommendations? The next one is evaluating the learning impact. So how do you go identify what are the changes in behaviour? What are the changes with the performance, and also the business results and the impact on the organisation is really important. And obviously, if you want them to reinvest in your program or your learning initiatives, that's the data that you need to collect. And I'm not talking about ROI, because that's really hard to determine. You know, exactly what ROI you're going to get from your program. You know, you should think about return of expectations, but also focus on your stakeholders' expectation of what they want. How are they going to measure it? What do they want to see post your training program? And lastly, it's reviewing your performance. So having a look, not just from the feedback you do, but asking peers and your stakeholders, how did you perform? So how can you improve? And whether it's, you know, once again, your design, your delivery, but also your communications. What other information could you have given them that would have helped the learning experience? How did you engage the stakeholders? Were they feeling involved? Did they influence the learning as you wanted them to do it? The marketing, the design, all of those sorts of things are part of your evaluate and feedback. So please, you know, focus in on this particular area. And lastly is the business smarts. Which I've actually cut off the TS there. So it's not business smart, it's business smart. So, and this dimension is what really sets L&D professionals apart. It's the skills above and beyond your design and your facilitation skills. And if you have a look on that left-hand side, there's courageous consulting. And funny enough, this came up time and time again across all of Australia. Courageous consulting just suddenly, you know, popped up. So once again, I'd like to ask you in the chat box, if you'd like to share in the chat box, why do you think courageous consulting is important for an L&D professional? Thanks. Oh, we're looking at that course, Con. Yep. Manages expectations of the client. Yep. Ability to say no con is a big one. I'll elaborate on that in a minute. Anybody else? Why do you think courageous consulting is important for L&D professionals? Yep. And very true. Push to see the client to see the really true learning needs. Yep. Helen, being better than is already out there and connects that little bit better to the new things, try new things. Yep. Yep, brings L&D to the forefront, not leaving to the last minute, creates real conversations at the right time. Absolutely. Yep. And Aileen, courageous consulting challenges the mindset of that impedes the learning. Absolutely. And it's sort of that ability to have those conversations with our stakeholders. You know, somebody mentioned about the learning needs. So it could be they've come up with the wrong solution and it's not going to solve the learning needs that have been identified. So it's sort of having the courage to be able to talk them through that. It could be like their time and budget that they're cutting. And I know that's happening a lot now where people are running, a week-long leadership program. They've been told to run a 2-day online event and things like that. So, and it's a matter of not saying no, but it's sort of like, well, there's consequences if we do that, and they need to be clear about what the impacts are going to be with reducing that time in the budget. And trust. It was interesting. We ran a panel a few weeks ago, Bill, with some heads of learning and development, and they're saying, given the current environment, they're getting approached from a whole range of L&D professionals they haven't had any contact with before, and they've gone, no, we're dealing with the ones that we've built the relationship up with. We know and we trust them. Now more than ever, we need their help. They don't have the time now to go and sort of build those relationships with other L&D professionals. So it's really important that you build that relationship with your consulting. So it's approaching them and keeping in touch. As I said, you need to have your area of expertise. So sharing area, developments and things that's happening in that space to keep in contact with them.
I think there's just picking up on that, Kerry, because that was a good conversation around what was happening. And I was reminded of something that Josh Bershland said this morning about there are people out there and organizations out there that are essentially course creators. They build courses for people. And if they're, and which is a product approach to learning and development, whereas what organizations are really wanting is performance improvement. And so it was suggesting that L&D people, professionals, really need to start thinking in terms of the service and the performance they provide. So becoming learning consultants or performance consultants, which says, I'm not bringing you a course, I'm not trying to sell you something, I'm trying to begin by understanding who you are, what you do, what you need, and not necessarily saying this is another L&D, another process to actually fix things up. I'm looking at you holistically. So I think that's part of that shift that L&D people are going to be making.
Absolutely. And I think something I didn't mention before, but it's also by doing that and getting to know the organization, you begin to understand the culture and more of an understanding about how the learning will fit in and support the bigger picture within the organization as well. It's not like I'm just running this standalone little component or piece of the jigsaw puzzle over here. I know how it fits in with everything else, so you can make it more relevant. So thanks, Bill. Marketing communication is another capability underneath Business Smarts, and it's all about knowing what marketing activities will work within the organization or the target learners and their stakeholders, the timelines that you need to be able to start promoting. What information do you need to gather from previous programs to help you promote future programs? So your testimonials, your case studies, things like that. It all needs to be part of what you're doing now. And lastly, finance and budgeting. And if you're like me, not my forte. I like the warm and the fuzzy stuff. But it's being budget savvy so that when you're talking to the heads of L&D, you're talking about the cost of the program, the break even of your programs, and the real cost of your service. So, there's, people might just run a training program, whereas others might have you coaching. They might have some online virtual sessions afterwards. There could be some job aids, a whole range of things that you can embed to add value in the service that you're adding as well. So, which is really important. So that's the 6 dimensions. So I might, before I hand over to Peter for the last stage about what are we going to do with all of these capabilities that we've identified, Bill, is there any more comments or questions that we can have a look at?
The one that might be just a little bit different, going back to the question of evaluation, and comments been made about that some corporations struggle with trying to put program measures in place. And I just wonder, we have a number of corporate members in the group today. If they wanted to unmute themselves and contribute to that, are organizations struggling to sit back and say, this is how we're going to measure the effectiveness, or what have you done to say, here's how we can measure effectiveness within our organization as to terms of the performance, or what else could we be looking at? And so there's a number of people that are on board with us that might contribute to that. And if you want to just unmute yourself and make a comment, you'll come to the front of the screen for us.
I'll give it a whirl, Bill. From my perspective, I actually don't start any of the design, development, etc., until I've got a measurement for learning, because for me it's all about a performance improvement. And if we don't currently have a measurement, to tell me what that benchmark is and where I'm starting from, then how do I know that we've actually improved? So look, seriously, I've worked for organisations where they don't know how to measure and they don't have the tools in place to provide that measurement, and that's quite a challenging situation to be in. But at this point in my career, I'm now able to say, look, we need a measurement tool. Let's put our heads together and work out what that is, and I go forward from there.
Good. It reminds me of the stuff I was doing back in the 80s with the continuous improvement aspect. And what we said is every process can be measured, every process can be understood. What you got to do is look at the lead and lag indicators. And we've very often signed things like training and other things as lead indicators that we knew would force things through. And so it was this understanding of deep process, and learning and development is a process that is part of the overall growth of the organization. So to me, that ability to sit back, and unfortunately a lot of people want to know what is the lag indicator rather than the lead indicators. So I suspect organizations are looking at that aspect as well. Would that be correct?
Indeed. And from my perspective, if they're coming to me and asking for learning or training or whatever they want to call it, then there must be a reason. So what's the data behind the question? Why are you asking me this question? Why are you asking for improvement? And if they can give me answers to that, then we've got a measurement tool, whether it be a real tool or something that we have to, creatively make up. We've got something to measure with. And whether it is a lag indicator or a lead indicator will be determined within, that question, basically. So
the 5 most important questions, right? Why, and why, in that order.
I think predominantly, Bill, and Debbie's very right. I think L&D is looked at by the business as being an order taker, and therefore, you shall do what we want. And when you do ask them that question, like Debbie does, what is a measure? What? You want a measure? so it's because of that general attitude around business that L&D is an order taker, and you shall take our order, and you shall deliver our order, and you will not ask any more questions. That's where courageous consulting can play a role.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
All right, Kerry, back to you, because I think we need to move on to Peter pretty soon.
Yeah. And so it is really challenging what their expectations are with your stakeholders. What do they expect to see at the end of it? What changes do they want, and then trying to determine how you're going to measure those as well. So let's click to the next slide. So as I said, there's lots, and there's 220 behaviours plus that we've identified through our framework. We've created the capability assessment framework, and we've been working closely with Peter with what now. So how do we take all those capabilities, put them in a platform that can help measure L&D professionals against future roles, but also the standards that are expected and the certifications within the industry. So Peter's created with his team a platform called SkillsLogiq that'll help measure and recognise those levels. But also Peter's very innovative. So let's say, like, every time I talk to him, there's another idea of how we can support L&D professionals. So thoroughly enjoying working with him. So I'm going to hand over to Peter. I'm going to have to stop sharing my screen and hand over to you, Peter. Thank you.
Thanks, Kerry. So hopefully everyone can see my screen now. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, Kerry asked me to have a slot for about 15 minutes to step you through what we're doing. Getting me to talk for 15 minutes isn't the problem. Getting me to talk for only 15 minutes usually is. So, as Bill alluded to, I wear a couple of hats. So I'm one of the founders and a director of SkillsLogiq, which came out of my first hat, which is at QUT. So I run at QUT. I'm the director of Open Professional Education in what's called QUTX. So it's a fairly new business unit that drives corporate and executive education from the university into the marketplace. And a lot of the work that we're doing around SkillsLogiq has fallen around or out of what we've been observing with the way corporates want to do L&D, how they build people capability, the workforce transformation, and the way that they essentially weren't being serviced by the formal education market, in particular universities. And there's a number of dynamics going on in all this, and it really, some of the observations that drove where we got to was increasingly employers want to create what's called the competency-based workforce. The workforce that has a defined skill set or competency set, skills, knowledge and behaviours specific to the roles of people in that organisation. And identifying the skills gaps out of that sort of construct then becomes a starting point to actually prioritise skilling investments. And when we're talking about the corporate learning market, it is such a large market globally and such a large growing market. So it's, at the moment we sit around, it's about $20 billion a year US. Within 6 years, it's anticipated it's going to hit 50 billion. So what that actually tells us is corporates are not only wanting to do more skill development across the board, but they actually want to take greater and greater responsibility of it themselves. So it actually means they're trying to be smarter about it and more highly targeted. So that created a whole heap of challenges out of what we fell through. So our model in our platform is to help different organisations create what we call capability academies. So Bill referenced in a couple of comments Josh Burson, and he's been really the father of the concept of the capability academy from a workforce development perspective. And it's really recognising the way learning gets delivered, how it's changed from the early 2000s today, from let's just create, you've got this new thing called the learning management system, let's just go get more content and dump it to people and hope for the best, to now, well, what does it actually mean for the performance of the individual and learning in the flow of work? So it's really starting to get this construct around helping individuals do their job better at the same time as how they can further their careers. So in the partnership between SkillsLogiq and ILP, it's really about a deep engagement platform in the academy as a community of practice that's focused on the development of the learning professional and how individuals can progress. One of the other observations that I saw that sort of really, I suppose, got my creative juices flowing was what is happening globally. And we're seeing this phenomena more in the US, the North American market, of the creation of the Chief Learning Officer. And it's bringing L&D outside of the HR function, having it as a C-suite, and they have responsibility as a C-suite person to actually drive workforce capability. Now, that's a really different construct than most organisations in Australia. So one's a maturity issue, scale and size also, you know, influences that. But it's starting to happen. In fact, even government agencies now are starting to create that Chief Learning Officer. I heard my first one in the federal government with the Federal Police, which was really interesting. So that sort of capability and the framework that ILP has created, we've recently road tested in actually doing a maturity assessment for a large government organisation here in Queensland. We ran through almost just over 400 L&D people in that broad function, and the results were very eye-opening for the executive, to the extent that they're saying, well, what is it that we're actually good at? What should we be doing? And how do we actually do this in a different way? Because doing business in an L&D sense in the old way just isn't going to cut it. And by the way, we're going to have less money to do it. So these sort of dynamics are really coming to play. So we're applying these principles into the ILP Academy to really focus on the performance. Our platform really came out of our work with QUT, and what we were seeing, individuals wanted to get supported once they've gone through a program, right from an award program. There might be an MBA student right down to professional development. And we saw a number of constructs going in, you know, understanding where the skills gaps are for them as an individual, maybe their team, maybe the whole organisation, being able to benchmark themselves, how to prioritise that, and aligning their professional development needs, the training, irrespective of who the provider is, directly to those needs. So when we started, one of our supporting clients in this was the Department of Defence. So they came to us and said, look, our biggest job family is engineering and technical, not surprisingly. And he said, we've got a number of challenges. Number one is we've got no idea what the skilling profile is of our workforce. Number two is, if we don't know that, how do we identify the skills needs to direct our training budget? And number three, currently we're supporting about 1,200 training products, and in their language it was everything from PhDs to basket weaving. So they were doing a lot, and their challenge to us was, really, we need to have that construct because we want to support 50 training products that actually make a difference. So that sort of conversation that we just had about impact and about evaluation and what difference does it make, that's the heart of it. And this is where organisations increasingly are going. Then how do you actually support the environment, particularly in a peer-to-peer? If you think about a community, a lot of learning happens between participants. You know, when I do a workshop myself, if they're not learning more from each other than they are from you, you're probably not being a really good facilitator. Those shared experiences are gold. How do you actually foster that? Same sort of concept, but also linking it into the thought leadership. Workforce innovation, you've got a problem in your job, how do you fix it? So we've got some particular things around that. Diagnosing performance. You don't know, that example with a government agency, they thought they were doing pretty well. You know, they don't know what they don't know, but most of the people in those roles have been doing the job in the same role for 20, 30, 40 years. Well, if that's all you know, that's all you know. So what's contemporary best practice, and across a range of areas, and then right through to mentoring. So it's really that holistic enablement across the board. So what we started with in terms of the skills assessment, what we provide and what members will have is what we call their own skills passport. So it's personalised. And it becomes an environment for you to manage your development needs over time. And this is where effectively you do your own profile. You can do it against your ILP certification membership, but also against generic standardised roles in industry. I'll talk a little in a minute about some of the things that sort of fall out of that, but it starts to then identify, based on that role, what are your top development needs based on your biggest gap in your profile. So what are the top 3, 4, 5 things you should be focusing on to take responsibility for? One of the really interesting things in this whole environment in the corporate training market is the reality that in certain technical domains and professions, for every dollar the corporate spends on training, the individual will spend 2. So you actually think about what that means, that individuals are wanting to be more competitive, they need to get support, and frankly, if the organisation's not going to support them, they're not going to keep them. So, you know, the challenge in the skills challenge language that's falling out, this is about empowerment. Okay, take responsibility yourself. You can attach your own credentialing as you get evidence of attainment and a whole heap of things in that. So it becomes this living thing that becomes a foundation for transparency, clarity, and prioritising yourself as individuals. So how do we go about this? And I've got a little cut down video for those who have been in and played with it. You will have seen the video, but I'll show you that. But it really is simple. It's a 3-stage process. So you register, you access it, go to the menu, you assess against your skills that you believe you've got, and you ignore the ones you think you don't have. You rate that, and then once that's done, you choose your both profiles, your membership profile and the standard industry role. And then that gives you your own personal profile. Then once you've actually got that, you can go back in at any time and say, well, I'd actually like to assess myself against a different role. And this actually starts to touch on career planning and professional development, is that you might be a facilitator today, but your aspiration might be to be a manager of L&D. In a corporate. Okay, by then selecting the button, here's the additional skills you might need to pick up. To give you a really quick snapshot, now I hope this works, and I'll talk over this. So this is the process in the self-assessment. So literally you go up to the skills menu and the self-assessment pops up. You know, add competencies, and all the competencies appear that's in the framework. Select each of them, assess to the appropriate level, you work your way down it, ignore the ones you don't want or don't have, and if you want to leave at any time, you just go add and save. Really is as simple as that. If you haven't finished, you just click no, and allows you to keep coming back. So it gives you a running tally and tells you where you're up to. And when you come back, it doesn't give you the profile until you do complete it. So you just work your way down, get to that add and save, and then if you have finished, go yes. That then allows you to access your skills passport. There's no data in this one on that screenshot because I haven't selected my profiles. Literally click a button. So what is my membership profile? A range of panels will pop up in both the membership and the professional. And basically you just select which one applies to you. Same with the professional. The standard industry roles, there's a definition for each of those. Go in, pick them. The one that's not in there now is actually other. We had to have that for a client because they didn't fit into the mould, but we've taken that out. And again, you've got exactly the same thing. My bottom competencies, which we actually just title your learning needs. It allows you to prioritise whatever that may be. Your professional profile, where do you sit based on that role, as well as your membership profile. So you can actually see, you can start to really focus down on what's important and what's of priority for you. And again, come back at any time. You might pick a different role. You might actually say, well, I've been to training. I've got these additional skills. I want to do that. And again, you can add your credentials. And you can then download your own report. It's profile based on that role. You get that, print that off, save it yourself, and off you go. You can get it in different formats, PDFs, Word, Excel, whatever. You can even go to the extent of having a team view if you're from a corporate environment. So that gives you a feel on really how straightforward it is. It really is as simple as that. It's all data driven. Why that's important is as we go into other areas, what gets identified then helps inform other experiences in the platform. So then when you go into the training market, you'll notice that, okay, we've got in here all the ILP training, and there's a little, go back, there's a little, little blue box on that, and that tells you how many competencies that training product meets your needs. So when you click on that, it actually tells you what they are and what level. So again, you can go and do anything, or you can really start to focus on what is best bang for buck based on your priorities. Then we get into our learning communities, and we back end this with thought leadership, and particularly linking it back to the academic environment. What we found is that learners, once they like engaging with the bleeding edge, I suppose. What's the most recent research? What is it telling us? So we have, each of these communities are defined what we call by channels. So channel is a domain of practice. So it might be L&D, it might be project management, it might be whatever. You only get the information that you're interested in. So you profile yourself according to that. So it allows you to access a whole range of things. So tools are basically the things you teach, but they're written for the practitioner. How do you use it in practice with some artifacts? Resources, discussion boards, events, sharing problems. I've got this problem. Has anyone actually solved it in their own environment, or validated or whatever? It does go into some other areas that we haven't enabled in this yet, but for example, it might be looking for a technology solution and you want to go out to researchers. One good one that's actually come up from an L&D group is actually around behavioural economics. So if we trained in this to actually get an understanding of our customer, what's the cutting edge of that? What is it telling us? How does that shape our product development as a company? So we actually link to some of the clever folks around that. So discussion boards, events, so you can actually see, this is actually a push-pull environment about engagement with peer-to-peer, but in each of those channels, we also have academic curators. So on a regular basis, weekly, they will put up the most recent academic journal articles. Here's a case study, here is whatever. So there's a continual flow of new bleeding edge stuff that will be of interest in those domains that you have. So for example, if you had a tool and you're a finance person and you wanted to know about this asset pricing model, what is it? How do you apply it in practice? There's some images, you can click on them, blow them up, put them on your wall. There's references, there's videos, there might be articles attached to it, but it's really about that standalone thing. When we actually investigated this sort of capability, there's a number of web-based things that are out there, mind tools and that sort of thing. But what we actually found is when we surveyed people, it fell out of use, and the issue was currency. So if they're pushing a framework for use in practice, but it's actually 3 generations old, they don't renew. So currency is important. So we provide this to academics to use in their environment, and their obligation is to actually keep it current. So if they're going to use it, make it current, and then it sort of populates across. It also has a lockdown version, so that stuff that might be very particular, created by ILP members, it's private to the ILP Academy. No one else has access to that. Resources in the same way, so it might be the articles, it might be videos or whatever it is. Again, it's a bit of a push. So it's all searchable and you can do all sorts of things. So that gives you a snapshot. That really is the Reader's Digest version. There's a number of things to come. This will be a bit of a transition now that ILP's new website's up and bringing this in online over the next few weeks. And we'll be having some special promos around this for early movers. And relevance to the different types of user who are members. One is a consultants offering. So this sort of skills assessment, how consultants can actually take this and use it for their own clients. And it could be a report by report. It could be, hey, you want your own branded version with Joe Smith logo on it, and it's you use it for your clients. So we have a really low cost model for that for subscribe. So you don't have to go and buy an enterprise solution, which up until now you basically do, or as a lot of organisations do, try to manage it on an Excel spreadsheet, and good luck to you. We actually found when we were engaging with Defence, they were running 640 spreadsheets across the organisation trying to do skills assessments. Not really effective. So you know, there's a range of things in that. For corporates, being able to do that sort of thing, but we have multiple competencies in there. So if you're public sector, we have the Queensland Public Sector's Leading for Queensland. We have digital skills. We have a whole library of these things. You think about an individual and it's about their profile. So you might have someone that is a digital worker. It's defined by an international framework standard called Sophia out of the UK. Most large organisations use that. But they will also be a project manager. They also might be a leader in a government department. So it actually could be an amalgam of those skills because they want to capture everything they're good at. So what does that mean? They can have some 360 reviews, all that sort of caper in there as well. In addition to that, as we roll out, ILP will be able to offer then discounted packaged training and education through partners. So again, in that marketplace view, the approved, some of those may actually come from other ILP members, you know, if they're certified and whatever the rules are. So again, it creates that vibrancy where corporate L&D people can actually access this at a discounted rate. So it's like a group deal, like insurance. As well as, you know, apart from the L&D focus, one of the things that really has come to our attention is as L&D people, as a profession, actually professionalise, they want to become more and more subject matter experts themselves, be it in leadership, be it in whatever. So this actually also allows them to add those capabilities that are of interest to them as well. We'll also have learning design tools. So not only the tools and the resources, but we've got an activities for facilitation activities as a library resource. You can build workshops, you can So, you know, that sort of journey mapping of what it is, as well as the next generation of impact assessment. So some of that conversation we had earlier, some of those tools, both from a corporate, so you can prioritise competencies and direct investment at a program level, right down to a individual course level, you know, and you know, change language and, you know, make relevance. A lot of that assessment work is, and impact is really about context for the organisation. It is rarely generic. So while the Kirkpatrick model is a good framing, it is then, you know, some of the common questions I get asked, particularly at this level, is, well, how do we know this contributed to the strategic objectives of the organisation? How do you measure that? What does that mean? So if you're a government agency versus BHP, the answer to that is going to be really different things.
Right.
So,
Peter,
yep.
We're going to have to jump in now, mate.
Yep, I've just finished, so good timing. I was waiting for you.
Well, you didn't lie to us anyway about the 15 minutes. But as everyone can see, we've been doing a lot of stuff in the background, understanding and moving the research from to then into an understanding of how we can assess, and then moving from assessment to how we can actually help to develop the whole process. It's been a you know, a massive amount of time and going back and forth and trying to find different things that work, testing, going back and forth, and we're still very much in that overall process. So Peter, thank you for giving us that overview. I'd encourage everyone to go ahead and do that assessment, to test it out, because the more we test it, the more we can find out about it and things like that. But thank you, Peter, for taking us through that, and Kerry, thank you for taking us through the research stuff. What I might do before I turn it back to you to close is just to tell everybody, thank you for coming along again. I hope you're finding these sessions valuable. We've got our member lounge coming up on Friday again, so definitely get in on that. 2 weeks from now, we have Craig Brown from CCS Cards, who's going to be showing us how they're starting to convert use of imagery in virtual training with some new material and new processes that they've got. So I'm really looking forward to that one. 2 weeks after that, we've got Jane Anderson. I'm loading her up. In fact, I think she's probably just gone out of the event schedule now. Jane Anderson is coming on to talk about personal branding for learning professionals, and that's going to be outstanding as well. I'm now looking at another one with one of our members, Rebecca Sharp, and a fellow that she knows in the UK, who's I've watched something he was doing on learning in the brain, which I think was terrific. So we're looking at that as the future. And of course, if anyone has any ideas about what we could be doing at these online presentations, please let us know. Just one thing going forward from all of these, we're going to start running them from 3:30 till 5. We're going to go longer than the hour, because what we'll do in the first 25 minutes or so is talk a little bit about what ILP is doing, and then focus on a specific issue within ILP. So sometimes it'll be about what we're doing with the Academy, what we're doing with the forum, what we're doing with the capability framework. Other times it'll be about certain aspects of that. So what we're going to do is really sort of add an agenda. So you're going to start seeing in the going forward in the events that I've got an agenda laid out, and that gives our guest facilitator presenters that good enough time for them to really make a difference, but also gives us a chance to work on some things that are specific to us. So that's our thinking going forward. Melbourne's not going to see any face-to-face meetups in the next little while. We're going to be continuing these online forums going forward. But Perth, for instance, Layla's going to be starting up a face-to-face session there in the coming future. Hopefully Lee will be able to do something in Adelaide, potentially Queensland, and the team up there can get something going. All of these places where you can go to the pub and have a meal, we're jealous of you, I have to admit. Although here in Geelong, at least, it's not a total lockdown like it is in Melbourne at the moment. So thank you to everybody for coming along. Thank you again, Peter. Thank you, Kerry, and I'll turn it over to you to finish it up for us.
All right. Well, thank you, Bill, and thank you everybody for joining us this afternoon. And with Peter, I feel like a kid in a candy shop, because there's so many things that we're working on that's going to support the community. And ILP going forward, we really want to work with our members and get them to, the expert level, so that you're delivering those results, you're successful in your career. So ILP is going to be shifting our focus from not just being a membership organisation, but you're a success partner going forward. And through working with Peter and SkillsLogiq, it's certainly going to be an exciting journey in the near future. So thank you for joining us, and thank you for allowing us.
Kerry, just before you go, can I just take 10 seconds just to address a couple of questions people I had?
Of course.
You will see the menus at the top of the page in My Community. They're actually disabled. So that will be the progressive rollout over the next couple of weeks. That's why they don't work. So it's only the schools and the education one that do at this point.
We don't want to overwhelm everybody up front.
No.
I'll take it slowly, but it's
Don't scare you.
All right, but thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. Stay safe. There's no last questions there? No, all good. All right, everybody. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye for now.
Thanks. Well done. Thanks.